Good evening. For 4 decades, the Chabad Center for Jewish Learning has focused on the intersection of humanity that we all share as a people of faith. In one word, that's family. It is precisely that in that spirit of family that we gather here tonight to hear, to learn, and to be inspired by a modern-day hero. But I would like to begin by getting all the thank yous out of the way, and there were a lot of them that came to power to be able to create this event tonight. We would like to begin by expressing our profound gratitude and appreciation for every single sponsor of this event, but primarily the principal supporters, the Bar Yadin Family Foundation, HEB, and IBC. So, round of applause for them. Thank you. A very special thank you to Estella Avery for her very generous support over the years. And then these are Rabbi Chaim Bloch's words, not mine. Even though Natan Sharansky fought for freedom of speech, he gave me these words, but you'll know why when I say them, because I echo this sentiment. May God grant her, her family, and indeed all of us here this evening, many years of health, happiness, and success. So Estella, thank you for all your support. Thank you to Trinity University, our venue partners. Our deep gratitude to Juan Sepulveda, sitting right there, for his immense amount of time that he spent on this. Your title is Special Advisor to the President for Inclusive Excellence. Close enough? All right, thank you, Juan. Thank you for Kevin Hawkins and Sandra Hernandez of Laurie Auditorium for their assistance with all the details. Thank you to Gal Schweike, saw him earlier, of Schweike Media, for the printing of the beautiful souvenir journals that you should have at your seats, and you're welcome to take that home with you. Thank you, Josh Ridner, who came up earlier, and these are his guys right here, for always helping Chabad with everything AV related. So he created the video that you'll see this evening, plus his staff of videographers and photographers. So Josh, thank you so much for that. And that's for everybody. Of course, somebody that you may have seen if you came in from that entrance, Nancy Gold, who's the office administrator at Chabad. You know, she's always taking care of everybody's needs. I actually called her today and I had some special requests as well. So Nancy, thank you for all your help and support. And finally, with a thank you, somebody who's sitting backstage, Ian Fisher, who has graciously agreed to interview our guest of honor. And as he and I know very well, you know, Chabad doesn't take no for an answer. So you say agreed, I say, you know, he was forced to do it. But no, thank you. No, he prepared immensely for this, hours of preparation, and I'm sure that we'll all be inspired by the dialogue that he'll have with our guest speaker. So you should have been given some cue cards and maybe something to write with. Those are for questions that we will ask each of you to pass towards the center aisle. Somebody will come by and pick them up, and then we'll bring those up stage, and some of those will get asked of our speaker. So with that said, and getting the thank yous out of the way, I'd like to bring up the Vice President for Student Life here at Trinity University, Dr. Cheryl Tynes. Cheryl, come on up. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. I just wanted to say that Trinity is super happy to co-sponsor this event with the Chabad Center and Rabbi Bloch. It's fantastic, and I appreciate my colleague Juan Sepulveda for asking me to say a few words. So help me thank them for this partnership in bringing this to campus. So we are really delighted to be able to use this beautiful space, Laurie Auditorium. Trinity University is the premier small liberal arts school in this part of the world, and we are really, really proud of that. We have amazing students, and more importantly, probably for you, we have a history of fantastic speakers at Laurie Auditorium. A lot of times when I talk to our students who are alum, and have graduated, And then they start to compare their notes with their friends who've gone to other colleges and universities. They think while they're here that all schools get the caliber of internationally renowned speakers that Trinity gets. And they start comparing their notes with their friends. If you've never been to any of our events in this venue, we get people who are just rock stars in their fields internationally. And so we're really happy to be able to do that. And really, most of those events are open to the San Antonio community and the regional community. We seat about 2,600 people in here. We love to have a full auditorium for some of the people that we've had come speak. We are in for a real treat tonight. I will tell you some of the best speakers that I've ever heard have been in this place. Jane Goodall comes to mind. She was amazing. She talked about the importance of moms. I was like, sign me up for that talk, because that's really interesting. Natan Sharansky, who was born in Ukraine, is really courage and hope embodied. The world needs people like him right now. He sacrificed, as you may know, 9 years of his life imprisoned in Russia. There were many stretches in a cell by himself. They say that that is the hardest kind of punishment for a human being. We're social creatures. We need each other. I'm a sociologist, and I know that we need each other. And so to be by yourself, he stood firm for freedom, democracy, and human rights. You may know that he is the recipient of the Congressional Medal of Honor and the Presidential Medal of Freedom. He's the only living non-US citizen who has gotten those two highest awards from the United States. He's the author of 4 books. I saw some of you have like all of them. Fear No Evil, The Case for Democracy, Defending Identity, and Never Alone, Prison, Politics, and My People. I think this is the kind of world right now that we all need to be inspired and be reminded that it's difficult to stand up for your convictions, but some of us seem to be hiding angels' halos and angels' wings. Mr. Sharansky, thank you for being a beacon of light in the darkness. Again, welcome to all of you to Trinity University.
Cheryl, we'll have to look in the archives, but I think I saw Ted Koppel here 30, 40 years ago. Yeah, right? Here, right here in this auditorium. And the mamas and the papas, but that's a different story. So Chabad understands that today's children are tomorrow's leaders. It's why they created one of the premier preschools in San Antonio that my kids were fortunate enough to attend, and also created one of the most popular day camps, which my kids also went to. And it's in that spirit, like we talked earlier, where we're helping to cultivate and create the future leaders of tomorrow as they're growing up. It's, you know, we often say that we want to empower our youth, but yet, you know, as we get older in life, we don't like to let go of those reins because we don't think that they'll be able to take over. And Chabad actually has the opposite approach by training the youngsters, and they grow up to become our leaders. The other thing that many of you, Jewish or not, may know about is Chabad on the River, which is something that was the brainchild of Chabad of San Antonio that started many years ago, and it brings together people from all faiths to celebrate the Festival of Lights down on our Riverwalk. And we have people from the city of San Antonio, from the county, all participating, and international musicians that come and participate. And if you have not participated in that, I encourage you to look up Hanukkah on the River on Chabad's website and join us. You'll be among more than 1,000 friends and family members. And that's every December around Chabad. As Jews, we don't seek to lessen the faiths of others, but we want to create empathy and understanding for not only our religion, but for all faiths here in San Antonio. And with that, I'd like to introduce my friend and my rabbi and mentor of more than 30 years. The official title is Director of Chabad, executive director and senior rabbi of Chabad, but I know him as my friend who used to travel to Laredo with me and stay at my grandfather's house before you had so many kids and grandkids. And he's the man who really is responsible for putting this evening together for you guys. Others paid for it, and he put it together. So Rabbi Block, come on up and bless us with some words.
Good evening. Thank you, Howie, for setting the tone here this evening and for emceeing this event. You bring heart, warmth, and eloquence to everything you do, and this evening is no different. Providentially, we stand today just a few short weeks before the Jewish holiday of Passover, the festival of our liberation from Egyptian bondage. The image of Moses leading the Jewish slaves to freedom has inspired many, from our founding fathers to Martin Luther King Jr. Our sages relate in the Haggadah, the Jewish prayer book that is used at the Seder, that B'chol dor vador chayav adam lirot et atzmo ki'ilu hu yatsa mimitzrayim. And in case you didn't understand, I'll translate. That the message of the liberation from Egypt is relevant to us today as it was 3,500 years ago. For freedom is not just the ability to move freely about, it is a state of mind, the ability to reach beyond our own limitation and boundaries, to push the envelope and leave our comfort zones, which is another meaning of the word Mitzrayim, which is the Hebrew for Egypt. This concept applies today as much as it did in the days of old. This evening, we have the privilege to hear from an individual who has lived and accomplished just that. For despite the severe physical restrictions on his personal freedom, he managed to remain free and retain his dignity, his purpose, and hope. I am looking forward, and as I'm sure we all are, to hearing the insights into life from our guest of honor, Natan Sharansky. Speaking about pushing envelopes and raising the bar brings me to our special honorees this evening. Tzipi and Reuven, the dynamic mother-son team, are passionate and excited about Jewish life and Jewish continuity. They actually have a very special way of giving. They don't just write a check, which is important. They roll up their sleeves and they get involved. They spend a lot of their valuable time discussing and strategizing in order to get the maximum return on their investment and make sure that the programs that they support are truly successful. Tzipi and Reuven are Jewish visionaries who have helped shape the Jewish landscape of South Texas. They understand and appreciate the importance of investing in our Jewish future and have committed themselves to making a real difference. Personally, I am grateful to Reuven for always challenging me and asking hard questions. I always leave my meetings with Tzipi or Reuven uplifted and inspired by their love and commitment to the Jewish people. Tonight, we honor not only Tzipi and Reuven, who are in the forefront of the Bar Yadin Family Foundation, but also their spouses, Deborah and Yaakov, for embracing their vision and for their unwavering support of all the good works that they do together. We salute their vision and dedication to our community and are honored to present Tzipi, Yaakov, Reuven, and Deborah with the 2023 Dor Lador Award. Please come forward. So, in keeping with what you all do, and that is bring light to our community, we are presenting to you this menorah, and I know that Tzipi likes menorahs. And there's actually two menorahs, one for Tzipi and Yaakov, but one for Reuben and Devorah. But in shipping, one of them didn't come whole. So we're going to have to make that whole, and we'll get you your menorah.
You can have a menorah
And
and a Chanukah.
a Chanukah, exactly. And it just so happens that this one, we're going to have to look into the quality of these of this particular manufacturer. But nonetheless, we will go ahead with the presentation because the show has to go on. So, this is the Dor Lador award presented to Tzipi by Yadin and Yaakov Herzog, and Reuben and Devorah by Yadin, with our heartfelt appreciation for your friendship and support. The Chabad Center for Jewish Life and Learning, 38th Annual Gala, Adar 28, March 21st, 2023. So how about it? We'll take a little picture. All right, for whoever the photographer is, now's your deal. That's real.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, Rabbi Block, and thank you to Chabad. Thank you to my wife for addressing me tonight. They asked me to say a few words. I really do see it, as Rabbi mentioned, that this is like a business. I'm investing in Jewish community and in Jewish organizations. And the foundation, the Bar Yadin Family Foundation, was founded in 2011. And there's another person who's not here with us. That's my father, Natan Bar Yadin. And my parents both were very passionate about Jewish community, and I grew up with that. And when I got married and when I had kids, it became bigger, and I started getting involved. I enjoy what I do. I enjoy working in the foundation and supporting organization. I meet incredible people. One of the words that I really like and believe a lot is I meet passionate people. And Chabad is incredibly passionate about Jewish community, about Jewish engagement. And Chaim and I have a relationship that goes back many years. And in the last decade or so, we became more and more closer and more allies, and found ourselves in different causes and the same kind of together. And so I'm proud and happy to help. And not only is Chabad of San Antonio, Rabbi Block, but there's several other Chabads. It seems like it's growing. So one of the things that I always hope, and this is the message that I want to really impart tonight, is I invite other people to get involved with your time, to get involved with your money, because together we're a bigger force. And it really is a joy to give and to support and to watch different organizations grow, and it's incredible. Anyway, I'm going to stop. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Can I leave it here?
In January 1948, in the dark hours of the Soviet Union, a child was born in Stalino, who was destined to symbolize mighty struggles. A bitter, global struggle between the bald eagle and the brown bear in the throes of their Cold War. A lopsided struggle between terrifying tyranny and human rights, between brutally enforced atheism and the free soul of a believer, between monstrous anti-Semitism and a proud Jew, and between the temptation to collapse and the superhuman will to survive. Natan Sharansky graduated from Moscow's Physical Technical Institute in Moscow before joining the underground human rights movement, reclaiming his Jewish heritage and emerging as a foremost dissident and spokesman for human rights in Soviet Jewry. In 1973, Natan took the calculated risk of applying for an exit visa to Israel. He was denied and rose to the forefront of Jewish refusnik activities. In 1977, he was arrested on false charges of spying for the United States. But prior to the announcement of his verdict, he famously declared, "To the court I have nothing to say. To my wife and the Jewish people I say, next year in Jerusalem." Sentenced to 13 years imprisonment, he spent the next 16 months some 1,600 miles away from Jerusalem in Moscow's Lefortovo prison, often in solitary confinement and in a special torture cell before being transferred to a Siberian labor camp. He resisted and persisted with remarkable courage, while outside the Iron Curtain, the world resounded with public outcry and international efforts on his behalf. His miracle dawned in 1986 when he was released in a prisoner exchange. Leading Israeli officials, including Prime Minister Shimon Peres, welcomed him to Jerusalem. Natan was free, but his fight was far from finished. In fact, he had only just begun. He continued to struggle mightily for the rights of Soviet Jewry, then for the social equality of Israel's Soviet Jewish immigrants. He headed organizations, formed his own party, served in successive governments, authored, spoke, encouraged, reprimanded, led, and inspired. And he most recently served diligently as the chairman of the Jewish Agency for Israel, enabling Jews across the globe to fulfill their own dreams of arriving next year in Jerusalem. We would like to welcome one of the great Jewish heroes of our times, the Honorable Mr. Natan Sharansky.
Good evening, everyone. A warm welcome to our audience and, of course, to our esteemed guest, Mr. Natan Sharansky. I heard a little bit about awards backstage, and I can tell you that if I had to read all the awards, there would be very little time left for discussion tonight, so I'm going to eliminate even my discussion about awards, except to tell you about the Genesis Award in 2020, which is Israel's equivalent of the Nobel Peace Prize. Mr. Sharansky was kind enough to donate his $1 million prize money to coronavirus, and I thought that's worth mentioning. But with that, excuse me, we'll get straight to the discussion. So, Mr. Sharansky, you were born in Ukraine in 1948, which later had its name changed by President Khrushchev to the now infamous city of Donetsk. In your book, Never Alone, Prison, Politics, and My People, you explained that you wore many titles during your journey through life. Childhood chess prodigy, refusnik, Soviet dissident, political prisoner, head of new immigration party in Israel, member of the Knesset, minister in 4 Israeli governments, human rights activist, and head of the Jewish Agency. But that your adult life can be broken into 3 9-year sections. 9 years in the Soviet prison, 9 years in Israeli politics, and 9 years in the Jewish Agency, and as you famously quoted, that having served 9 years in each, you're not sure where you suffered more. So we'll get to the first question. So you described in your book, Never Alone, that growing up in Russia, you were deprived of freedom, you were deprived of a Jewish identity, and that you lived a life of double think. And even after your arrest in 1977 and your trial in 78, you were put in prison for 13 years, of which you ended up serving 9. But even in prison, you mentioned in your book that you lived free. So can you explain to us what you meant by living free in prison, by the concept of double think, and what it was like growing up in Russia?
Okay, thank you. So I grew in, well, you say Russia, it was Ukraine, but in fact it was all Soviet Union. And the Soviet Union was run by communist ideology, which insisted that people should have no identity except of the loyalty to Soviet Union. So nationalism was a very bad thing in Soviet Union, but especially to be Jewish. It was especially suspicious. It meant that you're not loyal, or you can be suspected that you're not loyal. And in fact, there was forced policy of assimilation. So I grew in the city of Donetsk, where there were probably 30,000, 40,000 Jews. Officially it was not known, but it was 1 million citizens, at least 30,000, 40,000 Jews. And we had nothing Jewish in our life. No bar mitzvah, no brit milah, no synagogue, no Hebrew language, no book about Jewish history, nothing. And the only Jewish thing which we had, it was anti-Semitism. A lot of anti-Semitism in the street, but also all the discussion in the family that because you're a Jew, you cannot go to this institute, you cannot have this career. And the message of the parents that because you're a Jew, you must be the best in physics or mathematics or chess and music, doesn't matter in what, but that is like the cure from having this disease called Jew. The cure is to be the best in your profession. So you're growing without any value of being a Jew. And at the same time, you know that there is no freedom. As a loyal Soviet citizen, you should not say what you really think. I remember I started my life of the loyal Soviet citizen when I was 5 years old. Stalin died, and my father explains to me, 5 years old, that it is very good for Jews that Stalin died. You should remember all your life that at the time when we were in danger, a miracle happened, Stalin died, but don't say it to anybody, do what everybody does. And I go back to kindergarten, and they cry together with all the children about the death of Stalin, and we sing songs about the son of all the people, Stalin, and I have no idea how many of these children are really crying and how many of them crying because their fathers stole them. So that is typical life of Soviet citizen when you know that you say what you're supposed to say, you write, you vote, you have a life of loyal Soviet citizen, and you know that all this is lie. And, but the truth can be only for the close circle of your family. So that's what I mean by life of double thinker. You're constantly checking yourself, your self-censorship, what you can say, what you cannot say. And it's a very uncomfortable situation. But to think that maybe you should fight against it, you're not thinking, because after all, there are no values in your life except of the value of survival, professional success. So it's all changed in 1967. In 1967, when Israel had this miraculous victory, and it was huge humiliation of Soviet Union, huge humiliation, because Soviet Union sent a lot of weapons and soldiers and money, and the intelligence told to Egypt to Natan, who was the head of Egypt, that at the time, go ahead and you'll win. And then they were defeated, and suddenly you see how people are asking you how you Jews did it. And you understand that for all these people, you're the one who did it. And you understand there is some kind of connection between you and Israel. Right. That's what we started reading in the underground about our history, in fact, about ourselves. And you discover that if you only make some change in your mind, you have a great history, you have great people, you have great country, and you want to be part of it. That's what gave you strength to break with this double think, to start saying what you really think.
Yes.
And that's when you feel yourself a free person. And this feeling of freedom is not living. You simply live with this. Even in prison, you understand that it's better to be a free person in prison than go back to be a loyal citizen in the Soviet Union.
Right. Thank you. It's amazing. So your wife, Avital, is a quiet and somewhat shy person. She manages to get an immigration visa to Israel. She leaves the Soviet Union. You stay on as a dissident because you denied a visa. And she becomes a political warrior on your behalf. With very polite chutzpah, she manages to make a meeting with Margaret Thatcher, the Iron Lady of Britain. She meets with Ronald Reagan. She takes part in a march on the Russian embassy in London. She takes part in Washington, D.C., a 250,000 people march. And she manages even to get you a book of Psalms in prison. So tell us, did you know this was all going on because your KGB interrogators are telling you that you're irrelevant and this is all nonsense and it's just a riot of students and housewives on your behalf? How much of that did you know about in prison, and what kept you optimistic in those years?
Well, I knew very little. In the first year and a half is interrogations before the trial, you know nothing, really nothing. They make sure that you will not get any information from the world. Then when you're in prison, after the trial, theoretically you have the right to have meeting with your family every half a year, but for so-called bad behavior, I had 2 meetings in 9 years. So during these meetings, you can get some information. But practically, I knew nothing. And KGB, of course, says that the world abandoned you, the world has too many things to deal with, and they threatened me with capital punishment. But you convince yourself. You all the time think about every meeting which you had with the foreign tourists who came to help us. And I, as a spokesman of our movement, I met with hundreds of them. They were all in my case as my accomplices. And you simply try to imagine that, no, it's impossible that these people will forget you, that these Jews from Philadelphia, New York, and Miami, and of course the state of Israel. And you're absolutely sure also that your wife continues the struggle. So you live in this imagined world of the struggle.
Yes.
And they are trying to bring you back to the real world of KGB. And then when I was released, I found out that my imagined world, it was the real world. And all what they were saying was lies, of course. Yeah.
So one day, after 9 years, things all of a sudden change. You notice that they're giving you food, a little bit of food. They're letting you outside to get some fresh air. They're not shaving your head anymore. And one morning, they whisk you off in a large jet with 4 KGB guards, and you're not sure which way you're going, but you think it's west. And the next thing you know, you're standing on the Glinky Bridge in East Germany. Tell us about your emotions at that time, because you obviously by this time realize that you're going to be released. You don't want to count on it. What was flowing through your mind as you walked across that bridge?
Really, first of all, you don't understand, I have to say, about things which I didn't know. At that moment, some moment, President Reagan had his first meeting with President Gorbachev in Geneva in the end of 1985. And as always, my wife, Avital, was demonstrating there in front of these Palace of Nations. And she had already a long history of meetings with President Reagan, and President Reagan really was mobilized in this struggle.
Yes.
And then he started this meeting, as he told me later, with Gorbachev by saying, you can keep saying that Natan Sharansky, Auditorium Sharansky then, is American spy, but not only I know that it's a lie, but my people believe to that lady. She thought, so we cannot take your words for granted as long as you're lying about it. And so I didn't know, of course, anything about it, but a couple of weeks after this, suddenly they take me from the punishing cell, and I spent 405 days in the punishing cell, so I was very weak and practically was lying on the floor all the time. Then they moved me to the hospital, to the prison hospital. There were like 18 different levels of diet, food, from 1A to 9B. 9B is 3 pieces of bread and 3 cups of water. So for so-called bad behavior, in order to break you and to make you to cooperate, they are giving you less and less food. So in one day, they took me from 9B to 1A, meaning that in the hospital they start feeding me and making injections for vitamins and giving me 2 hours a day to walk in Siberia with snow and sun, but for half a year I didn't see sun already. And they do it for a month. So I suddenly had some weight, and I added like 20 kilos. So then I added another 30 kilos. Now it's a problem, but then suddenly you are really, you're strong and so. And I tried to explain it to myself, but in prison it's very dangerous to be imprisoned by the dreams. That's what they will release you next day. So because then you'll be disappointed. So you are trying not to be dependent on all these hopes. Yes. So I explained to myself that probably they're preparing me for another meeting with some top official, and so they want me to look better. And so it continues for months and a half. And then one day they take me from the prison, take all my prison clothes and give me civil clothes, which they bought, and all that was very big on me, and take me in the car through Siberia to the airplane, then in Moscow. And near the airplane, I realized that my psalm book, which Avital gave it to me before my arrest, sent it, and which played a very important role in all my prison life, is not there. And so I demand I cannot leave. I don't know where, but probably something dramatic happening, and it was like my source of strength. So I lied in the snow until they took this psalm book also to the airplane. And then for hour after hour we fly, a huge airplane, I and 4 KGB men, and by sun, it's flying to the west. So Soviet Union is huge, but after 4 hours, you understand?
Yes.
We probably crossed the line. Then I demanded that you hijacked me. What is happening? And then they tell me that there is a special decision of the Soviet government for the bad behavior, which is not worthy of the Soviet citizen. I am deprived of Soviet citizenship and exiled from Soviet Union. And that's how I was brought to Gliniky Bridge. And then a dramatic thing which happened. You know, in the prison, they gave me all the new clothes and everything was big on me, but they didn't give me a belt because in prisons there are no belts. So they gave me some rope, which was keeping my. And here I'm crossing the bridge, and American ambassador is taking me and saying, "Oh, there, on the other side there is a lot of journalists and so on." He says, "We will go straight to the car and we'll take you to your wife." And then I say, "But where is the border?" He says, "This line is the border." And so I jump and I say, freedom. And at this moment, the rope is broken. So whenever I'm asked, what is the first thing that you thought when you entered the free world, was how not to lose my
your
pants.
pants.
Yeah. And then we go straight. I see my wife, whom I didn't see for 12 years. Of course, I say, sorry, I'm late. And we fly by already small Israeli airplane straight to Israel. And there they open the door of the airplane, and she says to me, it's our Prime Minister, Shimon Peres, and that's our Foreign Minister, Yitzhak Shamir. By the way, next day there were some titles in the newspapers that he's even shorter than Yitzhak Shamir. So yeah, but I felt, well, and then we go to the hotel, and they're celebrating with all our people. So I really was taken straight from the KGB prison to the hotel, so I really feel that it was like a Synagogue straight from hell to paradise. And since then, 35 years already. When you're in paradise, you can only go down. So, but I still feel that I'm in paradise, though paradise which, of course, needs a lot of checking and balances. Yeah.
Yes, that's amazing. So now you begin your second life, you're in Israel, you're free, and you go immediately into working to try and free the other 400,000 refugees that you know of, a number which eventually became over 1 million people.
Yeah.
And you begin an international, worldwide campaign, Operation Exodus, to raise money, and you, in the end, raise over $1 billion. I know some of us, a lot of us in this room took part in that campaign. There's people sitting here that will remember that fondly, but an amazing story. So you got right into Israeli politics. What were your political aims and goals and some of the experiences that you
Well, first of all,
worth sharing?
maybe I had to mention it before, but our struggle in the Soviet Union for opening the gates could never succeed. Not only could never succeed, we could never survive, because after all, the Soviet Union, the regime which killed 30 million of their own citizens in order to have full control. And here a few hundred Jews started this struggle. Why they would not be killed immediately? We succeeded only because from the very first day it became the struggle of all the Jewish people. And the American Jewry played a very, very important role in this. So after I was released, we used this context which we had with the Jewry also to continue our struggle. And I first came to America, and I called that hundreds of thousands of American Jews should come to Washington when Gorbachev will come there. By the way, establishment didn't believe that it's possible, but I went to 32 different communities, and everybody wanted. And really, when Gorbachev first came, these hundreds of thousands of American Jews came to Washington, and then Reagan again said to see, my people spoke,
Yes.
and he opened the gates. So after this, you really feel responsibility that big aliyah, then hundreds of thousands, and then it was more than 1 million Jews from Russia moved to Israel. And absorption, every country, when 20% of population are new immigrants, there'll be frictions, there'll be problems. So it became clear that absorption in the country will be quite a big deal. And so we created Zionist Forum, like trade union of new immigrants. But at some moment you understand that in order really to change the things, in order to move the budgets, in order to change the conditions of millions, you need political tools. That's why I was not interested in politics. That's why we created the Party of New Immigrants, Israeli Ba'aliyah, meaning that Israel on the rise, or Israel with new immigrants, it's double meaning. And we succeeded. So that's how I entered the politics. And then I was in 4 different governments. And when Bibi Netanyahu already in 2009 wanted me to continue, I said, Bibi, you know, I was in 4 governments and I resigned twice. And for comparison, I was in 4 prisons and I never resigned. So probably politics is not for me. And that's how I became the head of Jewish Agency. But I have to say that really it's not a joke that the life in prison is much easier, meaning that, of course, there are hardships and cold and hunger and punishing, so, but it's so simple. Here is black and here is white. Here is friends, they are enemies. You say no to KGB, and by this you made all Taryag mitzvot. You know, Taryag mitzvot, how anybody can say that he is fulfilling all the mitzvot? But here you said no to KGB, what else you can do? In politics it's different. You everyday compromises. You can never know whether what you're doing is absolutely right or it's absolutely wrong. So I really felt not very comfortable with politics. So I'm very glad that we could really change all the process of integration. And that's why I was happy then to move to Jewish agency, because there again everything is simple. You're bringing Jews to Israel, you're strengthening connection of Israel with world Jewry. That's already a different type of challenge.
That's incredible. Before we get to the Jewish agency, I want you to explain this, what I think is an incredible event. So you leave the Soviet Union in '86, stripped of your citizenship with 4 KGB guards, and you return in 1997. Now you head of Israeli trade. And you, just to quote from your book, you say that this trip became an emotional and symbolic journey, closing many circles for me. And your humor is wonderful. You say that finally you start to think that you are in fact the spy that they accused you of being, going back to Russia. So can you tell us what your emotions were and some significant events that took place on that trip back to Russia?
Well, because you mentioned this quote, I have to explain the context. You know, the people will not think that I really was a spy. But first of all, after I left Soviet Union, I wanted to go back only once when Andrei Sakharov, the great Soviet dissident and my teacher, passed away. It was like 3 years after I was released. I wanted to go to his funeral, and Gorbachev said no, because I was still considered the enemy of the people. After the Soviet Union fell apart, they tried to invite me in many different ways because they wanted to show to the world that the times change. But I was not really interested. And here I am in the Minister of Industry Trade, and of course we must have trade negotiations with Russia, and Russia wants me to come. But I put condition that I will come only if they'll let me visit Lefortovo prison. Lefortovo prison was the KGB prison where I spent a year and a half of interrogations before the trial. And for me, it is like my alma mater. That's why. So they really were hesitant because it never happened before that minister from foreign countries visiting KGB prison. But then they agreed, and after all these official meetings and very emotional meetings with Jewish community, I took my wife and we went to KGB prison, and they clearly made it very clean and very bright before I came there. But I told them I want to go to punishing cell. They said, oh, no, we have no more punishing cells. I said, okay, I'll take you to punishing cell. So then we went there, and I asked them to leave and to give me some time with my wife to tell her. She knew all the stories, but it was like in the theater, she can feel it. How, for example, with a cup of hot water, which you try to warm all your body, not so many different stories. And then when we went out, and there was a lot of journalists, because it's first and the last time that the one who was prisoner is visiting as a VIP KGB prison. And the first question was, why are you doing it for yourself? Isn't it something very torturous? To the contrary, it's so inspiring. Only think, 20 years ago, it was by far the biggest dictatorship in the world. And the KGB was the most frightening secret police in the world. And I had 17 interrogators, because it's against all our movement. They are all explaining me that that's the end, that everybody is imprisoned, there'll be no more Zionism, all the world jury is afraid to mention our names, and so on. 20 years passed, Soviet Union doesn't exist, KGB doesn't exist, and 1 million Jews moved to Israel, another 500,000 moved to the other countries, and all the world is a more secure place. And all this started that few hundred Soviet Jews rediscovered their identity, went back to their roots. Yes. And American Jews also rediscovered that they have family and yes. went to fight. And that changed the world. That's a good way to remind to all of us, and we should always remember how much power we Jews have when we connected to our history and united to continue this together. That's one story. The other story, why I discovered myself a spy. Before I went to Soviet Union, the leaders of our intelligence come to me and say that they want that when I meet foreign minister, the highest person whom I met, that privately, not publicly, I will tell them that we Israelis have information that you are sending your technologies to Iran. And we want that they'll know that we know, and we want to see their reaction. So I was very glad that finally I have some secret mission. And when I meet Primakov, the then foreign minister, and our official conversation is, of course, how it's new page, how from now we'll be great friends, yes. and the past is the past, and so on. And then I ask 5 minutes privately. And I tell him that, look, it's very good to hope that now we have a bright future, but I have to say that because you are giving technologies, military technologies to Iran, that will destroy everything because it's our main enemy. And I have to say, Bibi Netanyahu then in the end of the 90s believed that is the biggest threat. And that's why our friendship is impossible. He says, what are you talking, Anatoly Borisovich? First of all, he sighed in relief because he thought I'll be speaking about prison and how I'm angry. And here I'm saying, he said, we are not giving any weapons. We love Israel. We will never permit to somebody to whatever. Then I take the paper because I ask them to write exactly what I can say and what I can't. And I read in such and such time, in such and such place, the military equipment for the missiles, yes. The oscillators for the ballistic missiles were brought from that plant there. He writes it down. He says, no, it's absolutely impossible. It's false information. So, but we will check. Because we want to have good relations, we will check. Next day, I'm going on show souvenirs. I'm traveling with my wife. And just when we're near the foreign ministry, they said they definitely knew where we are. They informed me that foreign minister of Russia wants to see me. And I come to him, and he is waiting for me, and he says, well, you were right. We checked. It's right information, but it was private company. They all will be punished, and so on and so on. So that's information which then I brought to Israel, and the chief of staff of Israeli army thanked me for the very important service because, in fact, Israelis wanted to check whether it's true or not. Yes. So from that time, I became like special secret communicator between Russia and Israel for a few years. So I really felt that finally I really became secret service. Service spy.
So now your 9 years in politics ends. You head up the Jewish Agency, which was, of course, formed in the founding of Israel many, many years ago. And you recognize that the agency was created primarily for Aliyah, bringing people into Israel. And you recognize with the rise of global anti-Semitism and the academic intifada that's taking place around the world, really, on American campuses and with movements like BDS, that you have to do something different, something to reinforce the Jews in the diaspora and to try and slow down or stop this anti-Semitism. What were some of the challenges and the successes with that program, with your outreach to the world?
Well, first of all, about Jewish agency. Jewish agency was not created for Aliyah. It was created, in fact, to be the government of Israel before Israel existed. It was like the representative of Jews living in Palestine. And in fact, Jewish agency was dealing with building the Jewish state underground. It was not yet permitted. It was British mandate. But with the help of Jewish agency under the leadership of Ben-Gurion, they were created kibbutzim, agriculture and industry and the army. Now, but finally there is the state of Israel. And Ben-Gurion moves from being the chairman of Jewish agency, the head of Israel government. The official function of Jewish agency became dealing with diaspora Jewry. And what meant for Israelis dealing with diaspora Jewry? To bring as many Jews as possible. So that became the function, the main Zionist function, to bring more and more Jews to Israel. And when I came to Jewish agency, I understood that all the work of every emissary, of every work of Jewish agency, is estimated how many Jews he or she brought from abroad. And I told that, look, we are now, it was right when we had to save Jews, whether from Yemen, whether from the Soviet Union, that we had to bring as many as possible. But now most of Aliyah is coming from free countries, so it's result of free choice. You can send emissaries of Jewish agency who will be going from one door to the other, knocking the door and saying, why you're here, you have to be in Israel. And that was more or less ideology. I said, it will not help. I want every Jew to come, but because we are telling them to come, they will not come. You have to strengthen Jewish identity. You have to strengthen this feeling that they are part of the people, that they are part of community, that they are part of this history. And then as a result, some people will make Aliyah. Some people will simply become more active in their community. Some people will join this AIPAC. Some will struggle against antisemitism. It's all strengthening our family. We should not think in such narrow terms. Aliyah is the final act. But before we have to strengthen the connections between Israel and diaspora. And that's how we really changed the strategy of Jewish agency. Of course, we are for Aliyah and we are doing a lot, but first of all, you have to make sure that there are strong contacts between Jews and their communities and the state of Israel. In addition, when I started traveling in the campuses, and then I said to Ariel Sharon and then others that the most important battle for the future of our people are American universities. Yes. Because that is where, because of this new anti-Semitism, there is young Jews who are not prepared to this. They start being ashamed of their Jewishness, afraid of their Jewishness, running away from their Jewishness. And that's when we started sending Israeli fellows to the campus, and that's when we built bridges with many Jewish organizations to fight new anti-Semitism. And that's when emerged the programs like Birthrights and Masa and others, the idea of which is to bring as many Jews as possible, at least for a short period of time, yes, to Israel and strengthen their feeling of one family.
Amazing. Once again, to quote from your book, you said that the most important conversation throughout your life was your participation in the ongoing dialogue between Israel and the Jewish people. And we know what the challenge is today, with young people, young Jews growing up with their priority for universal human rights and supporting Israel and trying to forge an identity. They have a challenge. How are we addressing that from Israel?
Well, first of all, about this challenge, about every Jew wants tikkun olam, wants to see the world better. If you are not interested, then probably you're not Jewish, because it's such a Jewish feeling to improve the world, to influence. And then it seems that there is a big contradiction. If you are only interested about your Jewish cause, instead of being interested in the problems of the world. I have my own experience from the Soviet Union. I was a Jewish activist, and I was dissident at the same time. I was someone spokesman of Zionist movement and spokesman of human rights movement. And there were many people from both sides who were saying to me, you have to choose. Or you are fighting for the rights of your tribe, or you are fighting for the rights of the world. And I always felt that it is absolutely wrong. Why? Because when I was a loyal Soviet citizen, I couldn't influence on anything in this world, because the idea of survival means that you must have a professional career, that's all. You have no other values. And only when I discovered my identity and went back to my roots, to the history, you have strength to say what you think. And that's when you find strength to fight for your rights, and then for rights of the other Jews, and then simply for freedom. So what I'm saying to many young people that I meet at the universities, and I was almost in 100 campuses in America and in Europe, and saying, if you really want to change the world, it's tremendous work. You'll need a lot of energy. And there is no other source of this energy than your identity.
Right.
And that's my main message. Yeah.
So just a few more questions before we get to the audience. You travel the world. Obviously, you've spent a lot of time with Chabad in many, many, many communities in America. Give us your impression on what you see.
First of all, to be fair, I spent with many parts of Jewish community, not only with Chabad, but about Chabad I can say everything. First of all, Chabad succeeded to send messages behind the Iron Curtain before anybody, even in the times of absolute isolation, long before we started our struggle. There were small communities of Chabad, and there were messages from Rebbe. Second, not that we didn't have disagreements. Struggle for Soviet Jewry was a huge movement of different organizations. And each of them was coming with their strategy and their tactics. Chabad and Rebbe, who were very good in building connections and believing that Jews all over the world can be reached, and did a great job. At the same time, they were very careful not to irritate Soviet authorities.
Yes.
And they didn't support these public demonstrations. What, of course, was disagreement with some other organizations and so on. So on one hand, my wife, who became from very shy girl to the one who was leading huge demonstrations, and practically all the leaders of the world were part of her team. So it was different tactics. But on the other hand, she spent a lot of time in the Hatzer of Rabbi, and his secretary Klein was like in a day-to-day contact with her, because there was a lot of secret information,
yes,
what is happening between America and Russia, which they were the first to know. And now, I can speak a lot about Chabad all over the world, but I'll tell you one anecdote, which was a real fact, in Russia. It so happened that Putin appointed the chief of rabbi of Russia, Rav Berlazar, who was Chabad. And Putin told me in one of my first conversations with him, said, I know that for some of you believe that Chabad is not really Judaism, but for me that is a real Judaism, for Putin. Okay. Really, that after the rabbi from Chabad became the chief rabbi, so he started bringing one after another, inviting some Chabad shlichim, and they went to different parties of the Soviet Union, its huge empire, Tomsk, Omsk, Novosibirsk, and building their communities. And at some moment, I'm in minister, and Yulia Edelstein, number 2, was also minister of the government. We were joking with Yulia that he cannot be number 1 because he was only 3 years in prison, and I was 9. So now I am not in politics, and he continues. So some reformed activists are coming to me and say, how it is that you and Yuli sold Soviet Jewry to Chabad? See, what it means before. Well, you see, only Chabad Shlichim are there. Why did... I told them, you know what? I'm not responsible for this, but I can promise you, if you'll find somebody who is ready to be like Shaliach Chabad, I'll use all my connections, and your Reformed rabbi will be sent there. They said, what it means to be Shaliach Chabad? They said, it means that it's young couple with one baby are coming to some God-forsaken place in Siberia, and there are 20 Jews, and they build community. 5 years after this, they have 3 children, and there are 50 Jews. 10 years after this, they have 7 children, and there is 500 Jews. 20 years after, they said, okay, we understood, we don't have it. So only Chabad has such shlichim who are coming to some very far place, and they coming there for all their life. You have to understand, they're not coming for 10 years. We, in Jewish agency, usually end for 3 years. In order to stay on the 5th year, I have to give personal approval, because it's very rare. Because here they're coming for all their life. They start this language, Russian or French or Spanish, becomes their own language. So nobody, including Berlazar, they didn't speak Russian before they came. It becomes their life, and the Jewish community is growing, and their families are growing. So that's really uniqueness of Chabad.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
Two more. One question before we get to our last. So 2 more. Can you give us just a brief description of what happened with your meeting with President Zelensky recently? We found it very interesting, and I'd love our audience to hear a little bit about that meeting as well.
Well, the meeting was the result of many other things, but you have to understand that the war between Russia and Ukraine, or the barbaric aggression of Russia against Ukraine, is not the fight for some small piece of territory, by the way, where Donbass, it's where I grew for my 18 years, for first 18 years. That's the attempt of Putin to rebuild Russian empire. He really believes and feels, and is not making secret with it, that the biggest tragedy of the 20th century is destruction of the Soviet Union. He feels that he continues the course of, for him, the biggest heroes are Peter the Great, Ekaterina II, and Stalin, and he now has to continue their course. And in fact, and by this, he wants really to change the rules of the world today. That free world is built on this, all these agreements, United Nations, Helsinki, and so on, that even if you're a small country and your neighbor is a very big and strong, nothing threatens you, because that's the rules of the free world. He wants to change it. He wants to bring all these countries under his authority.
Yes.
And that was the idea of the war. And from the first day, I said that the free world has, that's on the first battle, and free world has to be there. And I knew Zelensky before because I'm the chairman of the Babi Yar Memorial, and he was personally very interested in all our work. During the Corona, 3 times we had Zoom, where he and his people participating, discussing without development of the project. I don't know the president who is so involved in NGO work after all.
Yes.
And so during the war, I visited him on the 9th month of the war. He was very tired. And the palace of the president, and only in 2 rooms there is light, because that was exactly when Putin decided that because he cannot win in the battle, he will leave them all without electricity and without water. And so almost all the power stations around Kiev were destroyed. And that was the moment when Kiev was practically in dark, including the palace of the president. And he was very tired, but absolutely determined. And he was saying, look, we are not asking for the soldiers. We are fighting for the free world, but we are not asking for the soldiers. We are asking only for the weapons.
Yes.
You give us weapons, we will win very quickly. And they said, are you sure you win? They said, no doubt. They have zero motivation. Their army is destroyed by corruption. And nobody wants this war but Putin. And my people will not permit me anything less than pushing their troops out of the borders. And, well, there were many other aspects, because the relations between Israel and Ukraine are not very simple, because Putin is on our border in Syria, and we have to attack Syria, Iranian bases in Syria every night. But what's happening now, and that's what we discussed with him, that in fact Iran becomes now more and more close ally of Russia, yes. And that's why when dictatorships united, we in the free world also have to be united, and we hope there will be more understanding in Europe and in America that there should be no deal with Iran, and at the same time we'll be together with Europe and America in fighting Putin.
Thanks for explaining that. So, like all democracies, Israel's Knesset has their share of confrontational arguments in the government, perhaps even more than their fair share. Can you shine some light for us on this current attempt at judicial reform by our administration in Israel?
Well, it's a big story. First of all, those who are now demonstrating and shouting that will be dictatorship at the end of democracy, there will be no end of democracy, even if this reform will be implemented fully, and I am against it. There are at least parts of this reform that I am against, but even if it will be implemented fully, there will be no end of democracy. Israel is a very democratic and vibrant country. That's first. Second, there definitely had to be some kind of change in the balance between our executive branch and juridical, between Supreme Court and the government, because in the last 25 years, our Supreme Court, because we don't have constitution, and so the Supreme Court decided they can be involved in practically in every political decision, in every appointment, and many other things. And the judges are involved in electing the next judges. That is not normal. So that's why it was natural that there has to be reform. The fact that the government took it from one extreme to the other caused such a reaction. Now, here we have to understand, it's really today, on political level, it is more difficult to build dialogue than a few years ago. Why? Because we had almost 3 years, including the years of Corona, when all the political parties were merged in 2 parties. One is only not Bibi, and the other is only Bibi. And confrontation was very strong. As a result, when they were finally, one of the camps won the previous government with 61 votes, but for this they had to include 8 parties, from Arab Party to National Religious Party, so they couldn't make any decision. And they existed only for 1 year. When finally the other bloc won, with 64, there was no dialogue, and still it's a big problem to establish dialogue. And Prime Minister is very dependent on all his partners, because they were all in this party only Bibi. The result is not a healthy situation. And when this new government goes from one extreme, which was really bad, but really to the other extreme, saying that now we'll have a reform implemented quickly in 2 months. So there is reaction from the other side, and because there was not enough dialogue, you see, suddenly you have the government which wants to implement reform very quickly, and the opposition which, instead of discussing it, is going and calls for massive demonstrations. So it is a little bit concerning that the dialogue is not as normal as it should be, but I think there is no way out. There will be compromises in the weeks to come. There are already started this process. So look, we in Israel, it's very difficult, as Golda Meir said, to run the country where everybody is prime minister. And so it is difficult, but that's the beauty of a Jewish state. Right. So should we be unhappy with the fact that there is not enough compromise? Yes. Should we be concerned about the future of the country? No, there is no reason.
Israel will be Israel.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Vibrant democracy, it will continue.
Thank you for giving us your views on that. We have chance, I have a handful here, but I'll just take 1 or 2 quick questions and read them, which are going to take us back into Russia here. How do your experiences and upbringing in Donetsk color your perception of Russia's invasion of Ukraine?
Well,
you spoke about that, yeah. Can you comment on the current prisoner swap and release and how some people are prioritized over others who have been in prison much longer? What would your policy be?
Again, the question. Yeah. About today's situation, political business in Russia.
Yeah, what would your policy be in making these decisions, I guess, in prioritizing prisoner swap?
Well, I don't know. As to the last prisoner exchange between America and Russia, I would say that America could do better, but that's the weakness of democracies. Simply dealing with the political prisoners today in Russia, I have to say that in a very short period of time, Putin took back most of the freedoms which Russian citizens had in the last 30 years. And in fact, today there are political prisoners who are accused in the same article as I was in high treason, but for much lesser things. Simply you publish some article or spoke against Russian aggression, and you can be accused in high treason and put in prison. So the only freedoms which are not yet taken away, it's freedom of immigration, yes, and freedom to have the lawyer. I couldn't have my lawyer. I was isolated. Karamurza, who is today political prisoner, or Navalny, they have their lawyers who can send message. I got 2 letters from Karamurza and sent him back, and he's telling me from prison how much my book about prison helps him. Yes. So that's the difference. But in fact, he can spend, if Putin will be at power, another 25 years in prison. So the only thing which still remains is freedom of immigration. And that's why Aliyah, in the last year, Aliyah from Ukraine and Russia increased from 6,000 to 30,000 from Ukraine and 60,000 from Russia. And I think this proportion will go and grow because Russian Jews are afraid that they will be behind the Iron Curtain. Yes. The Iron Curtain will be restored. So that is the situation. Yeah.
For our last question, what do you feel is the best way to support Ukraine and Ukrainian Jews today?
Well, first of all, I have to say that Ukrainian Jews, and by the way, Chabad rabbis, there is in Asman in Kyiv and Kamenetsky in Dnipropetrovsk, they are sharing not only all the suffering, but heroic fighting. Yes. Now, Jewish communities, of course, are suffering as all the others. For example, in Odessa, they urgently needed some generators to have light, to have warmth. So yeah, well, joint and Israeli Jews, others sent and are helping with this. They need a lot of medical assistance and social assistance. Like we have the best specialists in post-trauma.
Yes.
And that's something that they now need a lot, post-trauma and this new experience for hundreds of thousands of people. These are the things which World Jury can help, and Israel can help, and we are helping. That is the time when it's very important for Jewish community to feel that they are part of the big family and to help them. There are many refugees who are coming. Invite them to your houses. Make sure that they're supported. But in the end, Ukraine needs, at this moment, weapons. And so it's very important. There are some Republicans who are speaking today that against this assistance. I hope the American policy will not be. I had a lot of criticism of Biden policy in the beginning of the conflict. It improved for the better until now. So I hope it will continue because, well, America, which was very hesitant now, is giving the artillery. Then it was very hesitant about giving the tanks when I spoke in Washington like 1 month after the beginning of the war that probably they will need the tanks. They looked at me as if I am calling them to the World War III. Today, America is starts giving tanks. And the last question, which still has to be solved, is the airplanes. Yes. But Ukraine, which is unbelievably good in defense, will not be able to counterattack if it will not have these weapons. So yeah, well, the population needs a lot of humanitarian help and professional, mainly in medicine and in the social life, meaning like post-trauma experience. But the army needs weapons.
Right, that's it. Yeah. Well, with respect to everyone's time, what a magnificent discussion. I appreciate so much all your input, and your book is magnificently written. It should be compulsory reading for teenagers and above. And sincerest thanks to coming to San Antonio to visit with us.
Thank you.
It's appreciated so much.
Thank you.
Nobody leave yet. You can sit back down. We have a special surprise. We have a tradition for many, many years that we want to have our visitors leave San Antonio with the warmth of Texas. And we want them to take back with them a little piece of Texas. So, we have for Natan a cowboy hat. It's not exactly a black hat, but it will do.
Okay. Yeah. Well, no, I have a story about this. Okay. Thank you, but you're so kind. I'll tell you a story about my relations with Dallas. On our great demonstration in 1987, on the 7th of December, when I was speaking about when Gorbachev came, and 250,000 American Jews came to Washington. In the end of the demonstration, when people already started leaving, there was delegation from Dallas. And the leader of this came to me and said, "Is there any chance that we'll bring you to Texas?" And I looked at him, he has such such a beautiful, beautiful hat, and said, if I come, will I get such a hat? He said, of course. So when I came, I got such a hat, and for 20 years I used it on every Purim. Every Purim I used it, and it was great. Wait, then when I came for the second time, the head of federation knew already that I had the hat. He didn't know that it's finished at one of the Purims. They gave me the boots. And we agreed that when I'll come the next time, they'll give me a horse. So, okay, thank you for the cap.